watching Maine Biz Sunday, Maine's business news source.
In 9 months, Mainers will elect their new governor, and it's shaping up to be a tight race. At the moment, there are over 20 candidates vying to be the state's next CEO. And as each candidate jostles for position ahead of the primaries in early June, I'm sure we'll hear all of them say that they're the best ones who can turn the state's economy around and bring jobs to Maine. But who should we believe? And how much impact can a governor really have when it comes to improving Maine's economy and creating jobs? Today, we have former Governor Angus King here to help us answer those questions. Welcome, Governor King. Glad you could be here today.
Alan, great to hear you. Great to be with you. And by the way, this is all my fault that all these people are running for governor.
It is?
Yeah, because I proved any fool can do it.
Okay. We got that one out of the way. Good, good. I did want to have you here because it really is, when we think about this, I'm trying to do it from a business point of view.
Sure.
This is the CEO of the state, so we really want to see what, you've done this, obviously, so we want to see what it takes to run this state and what these people can really expect when they get there. So that's the first question, I guess, is, forever, I don't know if they're lucky or not lucky, whoever wins, what's the first thing they're going to be facing when they wake up that next day and they're the governor?
Well, I think the first thing they're going to be facing is exactly what the president's facing is, what are you going to do about the economy? What are you going to do about jobs? What are you going to do about job security?
Right.
And what I learned is you can do something. The governor and the legislature and the atmosphere in Maine can make a difference, but ultimately the economy of Maine goes along with the economy of the country. Mm-hmm. If during my time we created thousands and thousands, I say we, the economy created thousands and thousands of jobs, but it was because the national economy was booming.
Right.
And when the recession came in 01 and then sort of with the second recession in 08 and 09, the Maine economy goes down. The best you can do really is to try to improve on the margins of what's going on in the national economy. For example, right now Maine is about 2 points below the national average in unemployment. Mm-hmm. That's not bad.
Right.
It's not great in Maine, but it's better than it is in a lot of other places. And that's really where you have to try to focus. So the idea that a governor or a legislator or anybody else can fundamentally change the economy of Maine as opposed to what's going on in the rest of the country, it just doesn't work that way.
Okay, so I want to just have some quotes from the candidates that are out there. Anyone should react to them. For example, Les Otten says the most important three things that in the next 5 years for the state of Maine will be jobs creation, jobs creation, jobs creation. So we're going to hear that a lot.
Sure.
But what's he really going to be able to do, or not him, but any governor, in terms of actually creating those jobs? Can policy from the governor's office and the legislature have an impact?
Well, I think it can. I mean, there are certain things. For example, the legislature this past year lowered the income tax.
Okay.
That, I think, may well have a significant effect. One of the difficulties of attracting entrepreneurial people to Maine was the high marginal income tax rate. During my tenure, we reduced significantly the tax on machinery and equipment that was a disincentive to invest in Maine. So those policy things can make a difference. How the agencies work, how responsive they are, how our regulatory system works, is it fair and predictable? All of those things can make a difference. Again, though, fundamentally, we're going to be riding on what happens in the rest of the country. But that doesn't mean it's not worth trying to improve the atmosphere here in Maine.
Okay, atmosphere, that whole kind of business climate thing. Yep. That's my next one. Let's see, Rosa Scarcelli says, Maine has an anti-business image, and we need to change that. If we want to see our great state rise again, we need to have investment here. Our image as a pro-business state is really important, and the tax picture is part of that. How important is that business image and business climate, and how do we create that? Is it real, or is it just a marketing issue?
No, I think it is significant, and like I say, I think the step that was taken last year to reduce the top income tax rate, because when they do these ratings, these national rate the states in business climate, the marginal income tax rate is usually the first thing that they look at, and it always hurt us. Right. So I think that might help. It's a whole lot of factors. Part of it, though, is sort of what we say to each other. I've found that if you talk about how bad the business climate is, lo and behold, it's going to be bad.
Right.
And one of the things I learned traveling the country after I left office, when Mary and I and the kids went around in the RV, every state has its issues. You know, we tended to think Maine was the only state that had two Maines and those kinds of things. Absolutely, eastern and western Washington have those issues. Michigan, all of those places have very similar issues to what we have. And you've got to, I think, build on your strengths and try to deal with some of the weaknesses.
dealing with some of the weaknesses may have to do with investing, too. So that's another issue. Clearly, the state budget is in trouble. I mean, we all understand that. But in terms of, that's one of those roles that a governor has to look at. And can we invest? How do we invest in our infrastructure, education, those kinds of things? Steve Rowe says, Maine's top economic development priority must be to boost the education and skill levels of our workforce to ensure that the skills taught and learned are aligned with the needs of the industries with the highest potential growth. Well, that sounds to me like we need to invest in community colleges and higher ed. How can we do that?
Well, you've hit the nub of the problem.
Okay.
I mean, you want to cut, we've been talking about taxes. You want to cut taxes, but you don't want to cut expenditures in areas that are necessary investments in order to create jobs. We used to deal with these guys that were location consultants, people who told businesses where to move. And we invited them up here, spend a couple of days in Maine, talk to them. And I sort of interviewed them. What are the important factors? What are your clients looking for? What do you advise them? You know what? The number one factor is qualified workers. And I remember saying to one of these fellows, it was a national company, what about taxes? How big a deal is taxes? You know what he said? 7th or 8th on the list. Now, that's going to be a shock to a lot of our viewers, but the big thing that they were looking for is, can you reliably supply us with qualified, able workers? And that means investment. So you're constantly trying to balance tax levels against making the investments in things like R&D, education, community colleges, higher ed, research. That kind of investment, I think, is critical. That's why I felt that something like Tabor didn't make sense, because it only looked at the tax side and not at the investment side.
So in terms of investment, when you were governor, you had financial problems also, not to this magnitude, obviously. But how does a governor, if they wanted to sell bonds, sell voters on the idea of bonds, for investment purposes, for R&D in particular, for things like MTI. Every guest I have on here has gotten a startup grant from MTI, and it's been great.
Yeah.
How would you sell that if you were governor?
Well, we did it.
Okay. But I
don't remember exactly.
Coming into this environment now.
Yeah. I think often politicians underestimate people's intelligence. And I think people will respond if you tell them the truth and say, look, it's a tough time. We can't expend funds in the way that we always have in the past. However, if we starve the investments in the areas that are likely to help us grow, that's a very short-sighted, self-defeating policy. And I think people can understand that. We've passed bond issues in difficult times.
Yep. Last question I'm going to ask you for this segment was, I know we have a couple of them, both Les Otten and Rosa Scarcelli tout their experience as business owners, and that's one of the reasons they have say that they should be elected governor.
Yeah.
How important is that to have that kind of business background versus that kind of insider background? We clearly have Libby Mitchell, who clearly is really understands Augusta and the legislative process. Which is more important, or how does that work?
Boy, I don't know.
Yeah.
I came out of a business background. I'd never run for public office. And I think there is a certain amount of learning on the job that takes place. On the other hand, there's no real way to prepare to be governor.
Right.
There's no school. There's no particular, because business is different. In business, if you're the CEO, you make a decision, we're going to open a branch in Rumford, it happens. If you're the governor of Maine, you say, we want to make some change in the policy of the buildings in Rumford. You've got to go through the legislature, the committee, the legislative council, and all those kinds of things. So they are different skills. I think the short answer is you really need a bit of both.
Yeah.
Pure business people often don't do very well in politics, but people who have business skills and political skills, I think that is a powerful combination.
Great. Okay. Well, let's hope we get the right combination. I want you to stick around, because we're going to do some afterthought segment that we're going to show on the web. So stick around and we'll talk some more.
Sure. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. You can catch more of this discussion with Governor King in our exclusive afterthought segment, seen only on the web. Go to mainbiz.biz and click on the Maine Biz Sunday link. Stay with us. We'll be right back to talk about global aquaculture and how Maine fits into this picture.
Maine Biz Sunday is brought to you by Bangor Savings Bank, where you can enjoy free ATMs worldwide.